Welcome, fourth years, to week 2. I am recording this lecture because there are a couple of people, one in particular interstate. So I think it's important that we ensure that everybody is on the same page. So week 2, there's a few things that I've organised here. Obviously, some of it you'll probably need to work through on your own. And some of it, of course, we will work through in class. So the first thing I'd like you to do is click on this worksheet here. And what we're going to do, you're not going to spend too much time on this, but it's a little bit of an information, came out in 2023 about developing student teachers, which are you guys, understanding of D&T curriculum planning. And it goes through, and it is a UK-based one, but I think it's quite useful to see how other jurisdictions deal with D&T, but also, of course, we do a lot from the UK as well in our curriculum. And then there's a little worksheet here to complete so that you have that better understanding. Now, as part of the TPA, as you know, you will be required to do a diagnostic test, a pre-test and a post-test of one class in your ATP. And so I've got something here on diagnostic testing. So we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at diagnostic testing. I've got some examples here. There is a little YouTube about what diagnostic testing is. And there are some quizzes here. So we're going to spend some time looking at those. And you could do a Kahoots, a Socrates, Google Forms, Microsoft Forms, SurveyMonkey, etc. And also, if you remember when we looked at in CUR 3211, we looked, and also DTE 3110, I know that's going back a couple of years, we looked at different diagnostics in regards to not just the written form, but in design and technology, you can combine that with a practical element. You know, what's their marking out like, etc., etc. But my feel is if you're just doing a practical diagnostic, it doesn't lend itself well for the TPA. So I would suggest that you do a combination of practical, but also a written quiz of some sort. Now, the other thing to remember, I don't know why this has gone here, so my apologies. The other thing to remember is you have to teach to the gap. So there's no point doing a diagnostic that addresses the whole of the curriculum. So what you need to do is when you've gone doing your planning days or whatever, you get to the program of work for term 2 and have a look at what they are going to teach, because that plan would have probably, hopefully, would have already been done by your mentor teacher. And have a look at if there is any area that you think that you can slot in a diagnostic in a particular part of the curriculum. Now, it could be, I know a lot of people do sketching and CAD drawing and things like that. Other people look at the design process, but again, only one aspect of the design process should be looked at in your diagnostic, not the whole process, because you are not going to do the whole process in 4 to 6 lessons. So really hone in on that. Now, I have had students do the general course in regard to the ESTs. I'm not sure about over East, so excuse my misunderstanding there. But some people have done a quick diagnostic on the information for the EST, and then they've used the EST for their post-test, because that happens mid-term too. So that's not a bad idea as well if you're teaching year 12s. But there's nothing wrong that you can also do that sort of stuff in year 11. And of course, if there's any areas where you could do material testing, material science, etc., that's not a bad one too. So have a look at the program and really think about it. I am here during obviously this term in particular, as we have our weekly classes, for you to, once you've got your program for term 2, we can have a look at that and then decide whether it might be worthwhile in what week that to do the diagnostic. Now, it's important to do the diagnostic, I think, as early as you can in your placement, because it can be an issue otherwise, because you want to collect the data. Now, we've had situations where people have collected data and the data wasn't really what they wanted. And then they had to go back to another class and collect more data. Because don't forget, your diagnostic might not necessarily give you all the information that you need. You might have created it too easy, too hard, etc. So that's something to think about. So you might want to trial something potentially in the planning days, but it's not really the one that you will use. But you could trial it, do a pilot, and if it doesn't give you the information, then you can either make it easier or harder. And as we said, you know, the more information you can get as to where the gaps of knowledge are, the better. So you might want to do, if you recall back to when we did diagnostic testing, might look at maybe some multiple choice, true or false. They're very easy to mark as well, but they really don't give you necessarily a lot of information. So you might want to do some short answer and maybe a little bit of an extended answer. I've had students, you know, do sketching in CAD and orthographic drawings, and then their post-test is similar but doing it on a CAD program and printing out and explaining the orthographic drawing, etc. So it really does depend on what you want there. So again, I have examples here here's some types that you might find useful. Let me just go back up here. Types of diagnostics when it comes up. There you are. So things like entry tickets, online surveys, checklists, and all those sorts of things. And so there's some examples on how you can use some of that sort of stuff. I hope that helps. Then for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be looking at a bit more formative assessment, because obviously as you start teaching, that's part of your 4 to 6 lessons, you've got to capture how you've actually been assessing the students formatively throughout those 4 to 6 lessons. So I have a couple of things here. There's a teacher's guide here on formative assessments. It gives you when did you want to look at, different ideas, etc., etc. So you just fill in the gaps depending on how many students there are, etc. There's this little video from Dylan Williams, who I'm sure you've heard about in your assessment unit when you did that in 2nd year. Again, it's taking a little bit to load, but it is a YouTube video, so not an issue there. Just close those up. Okay. So we're going to look at that, and then I've got this little thing here about 60 formative assessment strategies that you can potentially use. I wouldn't be obviously using all of them, but you might want to have a go at some of these things that there's quite a few there, so you might want to have a look. And of course we are going to look in class, but this is for the people that are doing the online unit. Then we're looking at summative. So we look at diagnostic, formative, and now summative. And of course, summative is the end of unit or end of program or end of topic. And I've got some examples here of the MD&T ATAR, how to write exams. So just going through that process, it takes you to another link. And here is a PowerPoint on how to go through writing exams and short answer, etc., etc. Sorry, let's go back to the week 2. All right, so we're back here, and there's some examples of some examinations and marking keys from 2023, but if you go to the SCARSA website, excuse me, you'll get some earlier, later ones, the 24. You won't get 25 until March. They don't ratify them until then. And then obviously if you're over east, you might look at the VCE exams or the HSC exams. And there are some EST examples. So we'll spend a bit of time doing that, and then we're going to go look at marking keys and rubrics, some different examples, what are they, etc., etc. Okay, again, let's get back. That's an assessment template for SCARS of a WA with the marking key examples. Let me just go back. Sorry about this, people. I should have back buttons, but I did that in a couple of them and then it didn't work, so I'm not going to do that this time. Okay, there we are, back. So we're going to spend some time, half an hour or so, looking at that. The next thing that we're going to do is, if we have time permitted, we'll see how we go. Otherwise, we'll do this next week. We are going to do an order to the workshops. We're going to review the occupational safety and health perspective. I've got here the guidelines from the Department of Education, and if you are in a government school, you need to follow those. If you're in a private, Catholic or independent schools, it is highly recommended that you follow those. Okay. Also, the Work Health and Safety Act of 2020 in WA stipulated the following. This is regardless of whether you are an independent school or whether you're in the Department of Education. So these are important things to look at. We are going to conduct a, this is the workshop safety audit. Right, this is ECU one. Close that. And here's an example that we did at Guildford. So you can see it's slightly different, but again, it follows the same process. Risks and assessments. Excuse me, I've been coming off a cold at the moment. Sometimes it's taking a while. You guys online will be able to look at that. I've also put the student machine guideline here, the XLS spreadsheet, where you can actually put in, maybe what I'll do is I'll download that so then we can actually open it up. So it's taken its time. Okay, here, got to enable editing. And so if you're teaching year 7s, then you would deselect them all and just go 7 and 7 plus and OK. And that's what you're allowed for 7s, okay? This asterisk is for those doing vet, but there's only one there, that's that one. All right, so let's close that. This is the risk assessment document. So it's a blank one, and what this means is that you can actually have students, say, use a bandsaw at the age of year 7s, even though it's really for year 9s, as long as you have done a risk assessment. You need to look at the likelihood and the consequence. So if they're using a bandsaw, it is quite dangerous. So you're going to be up here. If you, at the moment, use year 9s, year 7s, without a jig or without any safety, it's likely possible or almost certain there's going to be an incident. So you're looking up here. Once you've maybe made a jig so their fingers don't go near it, then it becomes more unlikely or rare. So you can, say, well, for this particular project, I want them to use a bandsaw. But you just need to make sure that you have filled one of these in and have checked it and made sure that it is okay. I'll be honest, it will be hard for some of those to get past because obviously, especially in the department, they're not going to risk children's safety. This one is, excuse me. Right, a little bit of WorkSafe data WA. It was inspected and it was set up. So that's just some interesting information that you might find. And then we can dive deeper. And that is the actual Work Health and Safety Act of 2020. Because at the end of the day, this is what we are all governed by. The guidelines have been designed to address this act. But if you don't follow the guidelines, then of course you are not necessarily following the act. So that is the plan for today, in Thursday, for week 2. If you if we don't get through to the audit, we will actually meet at the workshops next week, and we will do an audit of the workshops, because I don't know if it's actually been done in the new one that we have. And of course, any other business. So that is week 2. Thank you.